Hello, friends, and welcome. Glad to have you with us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. So today I've been really looking forward to because we have a special guest joining us on our program, and I have a co-host today, Dr. Nick Sterling, MD, PhD. We happen to be related, and I'm really looking forward to hosting this with you, Nick, because we know the value of which we'll be talking about of the topic we're going to share. So my guest today is the co-founder and the CRO of a company called Pinoy Services. His name is Apostolos, and Apostolos, it's really good to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time to join.
Absolutely, Karl. Thank you so much for the invitation, Nick. I'm super excited that we're going to touch these topics together, and we're going to
We're excited to have you. And I just before Nick leads off with a question here, I just want to say that right here in my clinic we have the Pinoy system.
There it is. Yes.
We use it a lot, and we have a bunch scheduled for next week. Basically, what we're talking about is a volume oxygen max test and also a resting test. So VO2 max, if you've ever heard of that, for those watching and listening, has a lot of different metrics that it can measure. This system goes further, though, in the metrics than your standard system. And what I also love is the resting option, that we can actually rest metrics or measure metrics at rest. And we'll talk about this in a little while when I kind of tell about my experience with it. But this has been the number one game-changing set of data for us to have, so that I can intervene as a therapist, a movement specialist, a trainer, whatever you call me, so I can come at people with the best possible intervention. So thanks for founding this company, Apostolos. And making it portable.
Trusting us, Karl. Thanks for trusting us.
Thanks for making it portable. I've been to South Carolina with it. I've been to Mexico with it. It's cool. Yeah. So Nick, go ahead. Take the lead.
Yeah, it is really an incredible system. So kind of to maybe introduce listeners to what VO2 max is, and this whole concept of utilizing gas exchange measurements to figure out what's going on with your metabolism. There are certain metrics that you can extract using a mask and looking at how gases are exchanged in the body. You look at what goes in and what comes out. And that tells you a lot about how you burn fuel and what metabolic substrates you use. It also tells you a lot about your fitness level. And so what Apostolos has done is he's taken an incredibly expensive test that used to be exclusive to top athletes, and has really brought it to everyday individuals. So Apostolos, I just want to first ask you, what was your journey? What caused you to found this company, and really what was that like?
When I started PNOE in 2016, I was essentially I was studying engineering. I was studying nanotechnology, and then I started a PhD in sensing technologies in Cambridge. And at the time, I was super intrigued by breath analysis. There was a conference where I heard that every single biomarker that exists in our blood, it has, let's call it, a cousin biomarker that could be found in our breath. So I really started looking into the space of breath analysis. And there are many challenges in breath analysis. In many cases, it's very challenging to detect these biomarkers because they can be found in parts per million, parts per trillion, like super, super difficult sensing. However, it turns out that metabolic testing, which is the resting metabolic rate, and exercise testing has very proven biomarkers. We need to detect oxygen and carbon dioxide in human breath. And this is how I was really introduced in the space. Also, I was always into sports. I was as at a younger age, I was semi-professional, I was kind of competing in windsurfing, so I was really into sports, and I completely started resonating with the value of metabolic analysis when I understood that just by analyzing oxygen and CO2 from human breath, we can measure our metabolism, how many calories we burn during the day, understand the substrates that we're using, whether we are burning fats or carbs, the VO2 max, all these super important vitals could be just measured from our breath. So at the time, I co-founded the company with Panos Papadiamadis, my co-founder, and we started our journey. Since then, it's great that the space is constantly evolving. So there is a lot of knowledge that is always coming up about the value of metabolic analysis, about why we understand better and better the value of VO2 max, and there is constantly more awareness around these vitals. So this is how PNOE started.
Yeah.
Apostolos, I wonder what is your experiences with talking to fitness versus medical people about PNOE VO2 max? Because if I kind of rewind to medical school, you're sitting in a lecture, for however many years, and I don't think I recall ever a time that they measured VO2 max, maybe once or twice, but this is potentially one of the most valuable metrics that we have in terms of gauging people's health span and ability to maintain their independence. Do you find that that health professionals are becoming more aware of it, or is there still a huge gap between where the fitness industry and medical communities are?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say that we see that over the years awareness is picking up, but like if we were to look at our user base, a third, very roughly, a third of our user base is in fitness, and a third of our user base is businesses in wellness, and a third of our businesses are in the medical space. So definitely there are definitely there are doctors out there that are using metabolic analysis, both the resting and the exercise test, for their patients, and it makes a lot of sense given. And these are things that we will discuss today, but there is solid evidence that VO2 max is probably the strongest predictor for human longevity. So it makes a ton of sense to look, and it's not only VO2 max, right? Like a PNOE test would reveal 23 biomarkers of human physiology, and based on this, we would provide personalized recommendations on the nutrition, on the workout, and the overall wellness and longevity strategy for our users. So there is a lot of value in this non-invasive test that, unlike other methods, such as blood analysis, provides instant results.
Now, when you go to the doctor, sorry about that, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's fine. It's all good.
When you go to the doctor and sit down, you get your heart rate measured, you get your blood pressure measured, they take your temperature, maybe they take your oxygen saturation. I, for the last couple of years, have felt that VO2 max should be an additional vital sign, or at least considered to be, an extremely important metric that we get on everybody in track. I'm wondering, Apostolos, can you kind of break down why that is, and can you maybe go into the details about what happens as we age, how this VO2 max, that metric, as well as the other ones that are measured by the system, why they're important, like what happens to them as we age, and what are we looking for?
Absolutely. So let me start with VO2 max. Like VO2 max is actually one of the 23 biomarkers that we measure. So I totally agree that it should be a vital sign measured and tracked over time. It's it's something that we understand very well. I mean, there is solid evidence out there that if someone increases his VO2 max, and we can discuss how you can improve your VO2 max, usually by training, but if someone improves his VO2 max by just 1 met, which is the unit that VO2 max is measured, we decrease the all-cause mortality risk by 13 to 15%, which is huge. Also, we know that over time, after the third decade or the fourth decade of our lives, VO2 max starts decreasing by 10% every decade. If someone is sedentary, or if someone is active, it could decrease by a rate of 5%. It has to do with the fact that our stroke volume decreases over time, and also our maximum heart rate decreases over time. However, we can substantially slow down the rate that our VO2 max decreases if we stay active, right? So let's assume that someone is active and his VO2 max is decreasing by 5% every decade. In order, and this is like a very interesting concept, so in order to have, a quality, in order to be independent during your elder part of your life, we know that the VO2 max needs to be above 18. If someone wants to, at his 80s to be able to do activities like, walking pretty comfortably, maybe walking at a fast pace, be able to carry some stuff, walk up and down and stir. VO2 max needs to be around 25 or, mid-20s, low 30s. So by reverse engineering this number to today, we can see that the person who is generally active at his 30s needs to have a VO2 max of 50 to 55 and make sure that he remains somehow active for the remaining of his life. And this is a great way of protecting your future self in order to be independent and be able to do some things when you grow older. So VO2 max is a way of us understanding and assessing our lifestyle. So I totally agree with you, Nick, that it's something that not only needs to be measured, but it needs to be tracked over time.
I love that future self, the idea of investing in your future self, right? And if you're looking back in time, asking yourself, looking at your past self, what would you have done for your future self today? I love that concept. Can you maybe explain to the listeners, when we're talking about VO2 max, we kind of have a sense of what we're talking about. And although there are some technicalities to that term, can you just describe maybe for the audience in simple terms, like what is VO2 max actually measuring?
Absolutely. So it's the maximum rate that we can consume oxygen at peak exercise. And we, in order to be, in order to be able to compare apples with apples, we divide this number with body weight. And this is the VO2 max number for an individual. Now, there are VO2 max, although there are several genetic reasons to the VO2 max of an individual, it's something that we can significantly change with our lifestyle. And it's something that we've seen with our users. If we are very strategic in the way that we train, and we make sure that we spend an X amount of time at, a given intensity every week, this is how we essentially increase our VO2 max. And our VO2 max could be increased a lot. It could be increased, studies show an increase from 20% all the way to really doubling the value of VO2 max. And several of these studies are somehow limited because they monitor a small period of, like, these studies are usually done within 3 months, maybe 6 months. So it's very likely that VO2 max could be increased even more if someone is consistent with his training for 2 years or 3 years. This is very difficult to monitor in a study.
That's very interesting. I wonder what kind of components are responsible for increasing VO2 max. I'm specifically thinking about a twin study where they took 2 genetically identical twins and they compared their VO2 max. One of them had done Ironman triathlons and was an aerobic endurance athlete, essentially since the time he was 18 until mid-30s, and the other had stopped activity at the age of 18. They had profoundly different muscle fiber type distributions, like strikingly different. The aerobically active twin had a lot of slow twitch predominance. For example, if I recall, and I could be misquoting this study, pretty sure stroke volume also had a significant difference. What other kind of components can, like when we're training, what is that training effect doing? Is it, are there other parameters aside from stroke volume, muscle fiber distribution that are changing, that are contributing to increasing your VO2 max?
Yeah, so definitely, if we have more muscles, we utilize more oxygen. So definitely there is a correlation there. And it has to do also with the training, like pushing ourselves when we train in such a way that we reach our peak. But you don't always have to be at your peak. Like, there are other ways that you can increase your VO2 max. I mean, we know that most endurance athletes would spend 60, 70, or 80% of their time at the so-called zone 2. Zone 2 is another something else that a PNOE test would reveal. It's essentially this intensity. It's a given heart rate range that when we train at this intensity, we utilize the maximum amount of fats versus carbs. We're really utilizing fat as a fuel source, and it's an intensity that we can sustain for a long period of time. It's an intensity that, for example, when you're running at your zone 2, you may be comfortably talking, chatting with a friend while you're running or speaking on the phone. It's a very pleasant and low intensity modality of exercise, which has some massive benefits. So when you're training at your zone 2, you're kind of building a big base. Like, if there is this concept that, there is this pyramid, right? And the peak of the pyramid is the VO2 max. When you increase the base of this pyramid, you also create a taller peak. So even when you train at your zone 2, you kind of increase your VO2 max. Another super efficient way of increasing your VO2 max is to do personalized high-intensity interval training. So this could be, there are different ways that you can do this, but again, a PNOE test would reveal your zone 2 and your zone 5, which are two different intensities for your exercise. And you need to do protocols where you spend 1 minute at your zone 5. This is like your peak intensity, followed by 4 minutes at your zone 2, again, zone 5, zone 2, and you kind of repeat this for 30, 40 minutes. So this personalized intensity, because if we take a PNOE test, we will see that our zone 2s and our zone 5s would be different. So we, by really tailoring your workout to your zones, you can make sure that you get the maximum benefit and you really increase your VO2 max. We've seen through the VO2 max on the PNOE test, we measure the biological age. It's very reasonable to say that given that VO2 max is the strongest predictor of human longevity, we are calculating the biological age of an individual. And what's great is that we can significantly improve our biological age. Like, we really don't affect the number that the candles have on the birthday cake, but we can significantly improve our biological age. So we've seen cases where users reverse their biological age by 6 or 7 years in just a couple of months by really being strategic with their workout. I'm a big believer that, this phrase is like no pains and no gains are, these are so outdated and so untrue. Like, it's all about doing it correctly, and it's all about doing data driven, being very, very data driven in your nutrition, in your workout, and in your wellness, in your longevity.
I want to jump in for 1 minute. If you don't mind, I want to say I'm excited because next week I'm going to redo my resting and my VO2 test, because the max test, because I want to see how I've improved since late June, early July, because I've been working really hard. I just want to know, but I want to track this progress. And I have a bunch of clients about ready in the next 2 to 3 weeks to also redo theirs. So I want to track theirs as well. So I like having the first-hand experience of having my own baseline measurement from the Pinoy analytics and all the metrics that are offered, because it's helped me to intervene with my training better. And more important is my clients. I can dial in, and we can put these in, add these in so people can look at some of the metrics that are offered as far as and what are measured. But it's so great when we have something like aerobic capacity, or during a moving test, cognition and breathing, because that can be a really interesting outcome there sometimes, and it might be completely different than cognition during a resting test, right? Yeah. So what's going on? Well, with each of these metrics, people will see that when they get their test, everything that's measured, it says what it is and how it's measured, which I love, because this answers those questions. And it will suggest exercise, nutrition, and lifestyles suggestions, I should say, to help improve each metric, in addition to the summary at the end of each test, and overall where to spend your time in working out, what percentage comes from zone 2, zone 5, and resistance training, where your calories should come from in grams, how much you're burning each day when you work out, when you don't work out, what percentage of calories. I wasn't eating much protein or carbs when I did my first tests, and I knew I wasn't, and I just knew it wouldn't be good. I bet you this time will be better. And just the last thing I want to say here is what you're saying, Apostolos, is what what I also hear from people like Dr. Peter Attia, who you and I were talking about him yesterday, and Nick and I follow him as well. Attia is coming out with some beautiful information, research, Andrew Huberman, a lot of other ones out there. VO2 max test, VO2 score, has a high value in being a predictor of your best predictor of longevity. But if the outcome isn't good, the beauty of it is it's not a death sentence. It's not like you're going to expire next year. I mean, we can intervene now more effectively than ever before with what to do based on your data, your results. I have to add one more thing, is that what I love is that we have a choice of equipment to use and 4 different levels of intensity to test within or from, so that for anyone who might be listening who thinks the VO2 max test is always on a treadmill and it's going to kill you because you just have to kill yourself, it's actually not how it works, not with the Pinoy Services. And I love that, because then we could get more people engaged in getting measured and getting an intervention that's effective.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we do, like many of our clients, do also submax tests. And through our algorithms, we kind of we're able to extrapolate the peak.
Interesting.
But apart from the, sorry.
Can you tell us more about that, actually? Because that's probably maxing out a patient on a treadmill, for example, or anywhere. To do that in a primary care office or any medical office, I think people are afraid of that. So can you tell us more about that? How a submaximal test can be extrapolated?
Yes, absolutely. So essentially, by reaching 60% of your max, because we have a large database of tests, so we're able to kind of train our algorithm. We're able to predict the evolution of the test. Of course, it's a prediction. It's not the actual VO2 max, but still, it's very, very important, because if you think about it, for the everyday person, I mean, it's important to know his VO2 max and be able to track it over time. If it's if it's either 44 or 45, it doesn't make a massive difference. It's important to be able to kind of approach the number very closely, and this is what we do with this extrapolation. Of course, if someone wants to measure his exact value, he needs to do a full-blown test. But even from the sub-max, there is a massive value. And also, I mean, apart from the exercise test that we're talking, the vast majority of our users are just doing the resting test. And from the resting test, we're able to understand very important things about the metabolism. How many calories someone is burning during the day? What is the ideal breakdown of macronutrients that they need to eat based on their metabolism, based on the metabolic fingerprint that we measured? We can identify, Karl, what you said earlier, some breathing limitations. How our breathing affects our posture, how our breathing affects our cognition. I mean, there are thousands of breaths that we take every day. Clearly, these breaths affect the way we think, the way we stand. And this is what we quantify during the test. And also, very importantly, we can see things about the heart, about the lungs, just from the resting test. So, and also we've seen that, because this was another, like, if we were to look at the milestones of our company, obviously, like, creating a portable device was an important milestone. But we believe that what is equally important is to have created a complete ecosystem of services that follows the test. We don't just provide a metabolic device. We provide an infrastructure that the business owner can really utilize to create to provide a complete experience, a complete service, to upsell this to his clients. So when the test is completed, we get the data over the cloud. Our AI analyzes the data and we provide the reports to the business owner, who then provides it to his clients. And then we can do a consultation call. It's a 30-minute Zoom call with a metabolic expert from our team, who really explains the actionable insights derived from the test. Because what we've seen is that data are great, but what is even more important is what to do with this data. So we make sure that we provide the actionable insights. We really connect the dots between the habits of our users and their scores and what they need to change, which takes place during a consultation call with an expert. So even if the business owner is not very familiar with metabolic testing, he can utilize our device, he can utilize our infrastructure to provide a top quality consultation to the patient. And in many cases, and this is the last step of the final pillar of our ecosystem, our team of nutritionists can prepare a fully personalized nutrition plan that's based on the food preferences, the habits, and of course, on the metabolic fingerprint that we measured during the test for the patient.
I love it. I'm just going to say I've had a lot of people go for the consult call, and some have gone for the nutrition plan. Everybody's happy because the data they get is the best. It's really nothing helps more. The hardest, I think, behavior-wise, and I'm talking about myself included here, one of the hardest things to change is eating habits. But to have the guideline put in front of you with the data to support, where you're at and, what do you want to do to get that score up? What do you want to do to, whatever your goals are? It's a perfect piece of the puzzle to put into the equation because it's so relevant, the nutrition part I'm talking about. So it's really, really great. I can't say enough good about it, just so you know. I cannot say enough good. It's the most valuable tool we have that provides, in my opinion, the highest value data that we can possibly get.
Karl, thank you. Your kind words, mean a lot. It means a lot. And you touched a very important subject there on the nutrition. We've seen, indeed, changing nutrition habits is not easy, but educating patients on how to eat well, we believe that this is very important. We've seen that in many cases, users were undereating their calories, and they did like cycles of undereating followed by cycles of overeating. So they were slowing down their metabolism, then they were eating excessive calories. So really understanding how your metabolism works, how your body works, what you need to do, because this idea that you really need to starve during a diet, this does not exist. You just need like everything, you just need to have a strategy of how to do it and go from point A to point B in a straight line. And such data can really help in this direction.
Absolutely.
That's a really interesting point, Apostolos. One thing that you just touched on that a lot of people don't know is that when they change their diet, and let's say they go on a weight loss program, or there's some other different things that can do this, that in fact, most people who will go on a weight loss program via diet will actually end up slowing their metabolism. And that's normal. That's not necessarily an alarming thing, but it's widely known, and it's called metabolic adaptation, right? So metabolic adaptation is the reduction in calories that you burn per day as a result of restricting calorie intake. And it's thought, it's a pretty controversial area of research. There are many people who think that the degree of metabolic adaptation that you have is related to your risk of regaining that weight once you've lost it. So in other words, someone who slows down the metabolism a ton might be at higher risk of regaining the weight that they've lost. Because as soon as they start to introduce food back in, more calories back into their life, they're going to pack on the weight again. So now that's a controversial area of research. There's a lot of disagreement, but I'm just curious to know. Nobody seems to know how to deal with that problem. There are some people who propose a staircase or reintroduction of calories, but none of what I have heard so far is data-driven really at all. And I'm just curious to know, do you think that gas exchange and estimating, calories burned per day and kind of being able to keep track of that, keep track of fuel partitioning, can you see a role for that in this problem as people go from a weight loss program into more of a weight maintenance program? Have you explored roles for that?
Absolutely. That's a great question, and it's a very important subject. Unfortunately, the vast majority of diets fail because of what you just explained, Nick. So what we've seen and what it has been thoroughly studied in the literature is that as we lose weight, if the weight is not lost in a sustainable way, our metabolism drops. And this has to do with the fact that we lose muscle mass. And this is the problem and the key to the solution. So the only way to reverse this metabolic slowdown is to make sure that you minimize or even increase, you minimize your muscle loss or even increase your muscle mass during a weight loss program by doing resistance training, by eating the right amount of protein, by having a good recovery. And this would essentially be a kind of a force that will accelerate the metabolism, because we know for a fact that 1 gram of muscle mass is burning 3 times more calories than 1 gram of fat. Mm-hmm. So we can, like in an ideal scenario of weight recomposition, when we change, like let's assume that someone has the same body weight and he decreases his body fat percentage by 10% and increases his muscle mass. So he replaces fat with muscles. It's not so simple, but for the sake of the hypothesis. So in this case, this individual will have a higher metabolism, a faster metabolism when he has more muscle mass. So, and this is something that we really take into account when we prescribe nutrition and workout and overall wellness recommendations to the patients of our affiliates, to the users of our affiliates. So there are several factors, like training and maintaining muscle mass is definitely very important. The caloric deficit needs to be limited. Like doing a crash diet would definitely slow down the metabolism, so it needs to be done in a sustainable way. And the protein intake needs to be at a high level in order to make sure that muscle is being, someone does not lose muscle mass. We've seen that these are the major drivers. Of course, there are other hormonal components that we don't really control, but all of these things are things that we can control with our habits.
Yeah, like thyroid suppression, for example, or suppression of metabolic rate via more of a central mechanism, right? That's really interesting. I wonder, one thing, and I'm a little new to gas exchange as a technique. Is there a way to measure someone's metabolic rate via gas exchange, or is it more really that you're trying to look at fuel partitioning?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, gas exchange is the gold standard way of measuring the metabolism and the energy expenditure of an individual. And through the PNOE report, we will tell to our users how many calories they're burning on a daily basis, and also where they rack and stack when compared to other users with similar demographics. So, in other words, we will tell them if their metabolism is faster or slower than expected.
That's fascinating. I wonder if there's almost a role for predicting someone's risk of weight regain with this technique. For example, like this is a huge, as I'm sure you know, this is a huge problem with the GLP-1 receptor agonists, like semaglutide, and especially some of the newer medications that are coming out, the combined GLP-1 GIP receptor agonists. We're seeing even more muscle loss with those drugs, potentially more muscle loss with those drugs, and we see those in the clinical trials. So I wonder, if someone loses weight on these drugs or via diet and exercise, and if they had their VO2 max taken by a doctor, their doctor, and they have it taken again after they lose this weight, maybe it's a predictive marker for weight regain.
Yeah. So first of all, many of our affiliates are combining such drugs with personalized training and nutrition in order to avoid the weight regain, essentially, and in order to make sure that the body is constantly adapting to the new version of itself.
Mhm.
So, and also there are other biomarkers that we measure that could be linked with weight regain risks. The substrate utilization, if someone is burning primarily carbs rather than fats at rest, this is linked in the literature to a higher risk of weight regain.
Really
And
interesting.
yes,
Wow.
yes, and to also a higher risk for diabetes and metabolic disorders. So simply because the RER, which is what we measure, the ratio of CO2 to oxygen in our breath, is also not directly correlated to glucose, but is very closely linked to glucose. So it's not a surprise that all these things are connected.
Gentlemen, I'm
That's
going to jump in
fascinating.
for 1 minute, only because in 2 minutes or so, a little over 2 minutes, we're going to be having to end, which leads me to an idea of having part 2 at some point in the very near future, because we're starting to get
Absolutely.
into some really cool meat and potatoes here. Like, this is the beef, and I love it.
Absolutely.
However, with just a little under 2 minutes to go, I want to say, first of all, Apostolos, thank you so much for joining me. Nick, thanks for co-hosting with me. And do either of you gentlemen have anything more you want to say before we get cut off?
Karl, thank you so much. And Nick, thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure. It was an honor. And absolutely, let's do part 2 in a couple of months to see also, so you can share the results from your second test and all this progress. And for our listeners, if they want to learn more about PNOE, they could check our website, pinoe.com. That's www.pnoe.com.
That's perfect. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I want to make sure people know how to learn more, find out more, contact you, and get going with it. So as a practitioner over here, I'm just going to say, anyone in the business of doing what I do here, whether it's personal training or physical therapy or a medical profession, look into this. Look into it. It's an amazing product. Next,
and Apostolos, thank you for doing this. This is a great example of really a game-changing technology coming through entrepreneurship.
Thanks.
I love it.
Thank you, Nick.
All right,
Thanks.
gentlemen.
So to be continued. Talk to you soon, guys.
Part 2 coming soon. And thanks again, gentlemen. We'll be in touch. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.